They are the last of the big cats in the southern United States. Can the Florida panther pull off the road to extinction? Today on This American Land. This Arizona river is a precious corridor for hundreds of species, but development and an exemption from environmental laws may threaten this ecosystem. Let's call this Lab in a Can. This detection device may look like a garbage can, but it can analyze water safety from oceans to reservoirs to produce and fish farms.
It really helps and gets us to market with the greatest diversity and sets us apart from other growers.
This low-tech Colorado program is helping small farmers stay productive in brutal winter months. All this and more, now on This American Land. Funding for This American Land is provided by the Weiss Foundation, the Turner Foundation, the Daniel K. Thorne Foundation, the Pew Charitable Trusts.
Thanks for joining us on This American Land. I'm Bruce Burkhardt.
And I'm Caroline Ravel. Each week on our show, we'll take you to some of the most beautiful places you may have never heard of. But we'll do something more. Bring you thoughtful stories about protecting America's natural resources.
Our reporters are covering water, wildlife, and conservation issues. First up today, it's a paradise for bird lovers and a cradle of life for hundreds of species of mammals and birds. But Arizona's San Pedro River is threatened by development and a disputed exemption from environmental laws. It is one of the most ecologically rich places on Earth and harbors the highest diversity of mammals in the United States and the second highest in the world. In southern Arizona, the San Pedro River flows north from Mexico across the U.S. border, and with it flows a stunning variety of life.
The San Pedro riparian corridor is such a huge influence on migratory patterns for all kinds of animals, but especially birds. For the entire continental United States, that it's a very precious place.
Nearly half of the 800 bird species that exist in North America either inhabit or migrate through the San Pedro River.
We have people that fly from all over the world and knowing that we're going to have a particular species here for 1 or 2 days, and they actually come in just to see that species and then fly back to wherever they're from. It's one of their bucket list choices that they do.
Much of the San Pedro was designated America's first riparian national conservation area in 1988. Still, the river has been shrinking. Drought, but primarily depletion of the river's main source, is threatening the river's existence.
Like many desert rivers, the San Pedro has lost a good deal of its flow because the groundwater pumping in the area has drawn down the water table.
Expanding industry and development in nearby Sierra Vista and the Fort Huachuca Army installation are the biggest users of water in the region. As more water is pumped from underground, less water makes it to the river itself. Results of a shrinking river are now beginning to appear.
The cottonwoods, which provide shelter for animals and for the birds, they're beginning to die off as you get further and further away from the river. And once that goes, the entire ecosystem collapses.
Along with a diminishing water supply, laws designed to protect the river's many threatened and endangered species, and by extension the San Pedro itself, were recently relaxed for the sake of local industry.
A couple of members of Congress got together and decided that they would just change the law and provide an exemption for Fort Huachuca, basically just carve out an exemption from the Endangered Species Act. And it was really kind of unprecedented. It was a terrible precedent to set.
The Renzi Rider, as the legislation is called, exempts Fort Huachuca and the surrounding community of Sierra Vista from the requirements of the Endangered Species Act. In this case, the law would have guaranteed enough water in the San Pedro for the survival of its endangered species. Activists hope to reverse the exemption, but for now, without laws that would ensure adequate water flow, community members are doing what they can to preserve this disappearing natural resource.
What we really do mainly is try to educate the general public to recognize how important this place is, not just because it's pretty, but because it's also what we call a corridor of life.
This is a living creature that we're looking at, the river itself. This whole biome, this whole area here allows people to take away a sense of accomplishment, allows people to take away a sense of nature, which is literally in their backyard.
Riparian means related to or living along the bank of a river, lake, or tidewater. 60 to 75% of Arizona's resident wildlife species depend on riparian areas to sustain their populations.
You may live your whole life and never see a Florida panther in the wild. They're threatened by habitat destruction and, amazingly, by collisions with cars.
They were on the brink of extinction several years ago, and experts are racing against time to ensure that one of the nation's last big cats remains a viable part of our natural heritage.
Natalie Pavelski has our story.
Every big cat species on Earth is in deep and, in fact, dire trouble. Here is, in our own backyard, one of the most endangered big cat populations anywhere.
The panther is an arresting symbol of wild Florida, the official state mammal and the namesake of Florida's hockey team. But its fame and charisma haven't prevented it from becoming endangered.
Fish and Wildlife Service declared the eastern cougar, which is the nearest cousin to the Florida panther, extinct this year. Just happened. So this is now the last subspecies of puma anywhere in the eastern United States.
There are now so few of them left in the wild that captive panthers, like these at the Tallahassee Museum and rescued ones at the Shy Wolf Sanctuary, might be as close as most people will ever get to seeing a Florida panther close up.
You are now in the research challenge, okay?
Ricky Pierce runs the Panther Posse program at Florida Gulf Coast University.
Now, I want you to remember that these are called kittens, not cubs, alrighty?
Deer! Deer! Hog! Hog! Raccoon! Raccoon! So what we do just a little
An environmental educator, Pierce says her program inspires young people to become good stewards of the environment.
The young students, the 4th and 5th graders, have to go home for Miss Ricky, okay, and educate at least 2 people, and which is their families, and tell their families about this endangered species and how important it is to save this habitat. How many Florida panthers are left in the entire world? About 100, exactly. We only radio collar about 25 of them, okay, not all of them. This is a real radio collar. You gotta hold up to it. There we go.
In the 1990s, not only were the numbers of panthers critically low, but the animals were showing signs of poor health due to inbreeding. Low birth numbers, crooked tails, and other genetic abnormalities are serious concerns to wildlife specialists who are working on major restoration goals. Biologists have focused on correcting the defects caused by inbreeding. In a major genetic experiment, scientists brought in 8 Texas cougars, close relatives of Florida panthers, to crossbreed with the local population. Biologist Mark Loetz is with the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission. He says the results of that crossbreeding program increased the numbers of panthers and decreased the genetic abnormalities as the cats expanded their mating pool.
And that was a great success. We saw improvements immediately with that first litter. When we initiated genetic restoration in the mid-90s, the population was probably 50 to 70. Right now we're looking at 100 to 160.
But those numbers are still dangerously low. Experts say the loss of suitable habitat to sustain growing populations is a major concern. And they point to clear signs that insufficient territory is having a detrimental effect on the panthers.
Right now, probably the greatest threat is lack of habitat. When you look at the radio collared population, the biggest mortality factor is intraspecific aggression. That's panthers killing other panthers. Males are territorial and they'll defend those territories to the death frequently.
Okay. Okay, hissy face.
Adult male panthers need about 200 square miles of territory and have been known to travel across a vast range throughout South and Central Florida. One uncollared panther was even spotted as far north as Georgia. Females, especially breeding females, need about 80 square miles of territory. Most of them live in South Florida and will rarely travel far from their birth home. Eastern cougars were found in several southern states, from Florida north into Georgia and as far west as Texas. But the panther's current range is just a fraction of its former size and has become fragmented in recent decades due to booming development throughout Florida.
So the number of cats is now on a collision course with the number of people.
And as the number of panthers has grown, so have the numbers killed by motor vehicles on highways. Car collisions are now one of the main causes of death for panthers.
If we can't change some things with protecting some of that habitat, things are looking kind of bleak for panthers far into the future.
There has been some hopeful progress, with government agencies, scientists, and private landowners reaching deals to give the panthers more room to roam.
The biggest success by far was a land swap between a large ranch and the federal government that created the Florida Panther Wildlife Preserve. The second biggest thing has been the development of very sophisticated panther underpasses through area roads.
Underpasses like this one and fences along busy roads provide safe passage for wildlife to cross from one area to another. Cameras mounted on area underpasses have documented hundreds of animals using the safe passageways.
Panthers are habitat generalists, which means they use every type of habitat that's available to them. Down here in Florida, normally what they're looking for is thick cover under trees.
Because panthers are considered an indicator species, experts say that their work to protect the panthers also protects other wildlife that depends on the same habitat. Scientists concede the panther population is still too small for the animal to have a reasonable chance to be removed from the endangered species list in the foreseeable future. And the fundamental challenge ahead will be to find ways to allow humans and panthers to coexist.
So even if you don't care about panthers themselves, you've got to care about the planet that you depend on to live, and you need to save every part of that planet, and panthers are part of that planet.
For This American Land, I'm Natalie Pavelski.
Adult Florida panthers are largely nocturnal. To find food, male panthers can travel up to 25 miles in one night.
From oil spills to E. coli outbreaks, tainted water threatens people, beaches, farms, and wildlife. Scientists in California are getting some help monitoring water quality with a small but powerful new detection device. Miles O'Brien has more in our Science Nation report.
It looks a lot like a garbage can, but it's actually a fully functioning laboratory thrown overboard to analyze water samples in the open ocean. One day, a machine like it might tell us whether a beach is safe for swimming or if water is clean enough to drink. The so-called lab in a can is nicknamed ESP.
The ESP is the Environmental Sample Processor, and it's an instrument that collects water, allows you to extract particles from that, and use molecular probe technology to understand the presence of certain organisms and their activities.
With support from the National Science Foundation, microbiologist Chris Sholin and his team at the Monterey Bay Aquarium Research Institute created the portable ESP to work on its own, so they don't have to travel back to the lab every time they want to analyze samples they collect at sea.
It's remarkable to us that you can do the kinds of things that you do on a stack of batteries that run on your flashlight and communicate this information anywhere where you have an internet connection. And so it is a true remote laboratory that you can interact with, you can change what it's doing, and have it give you back information anywhere you can find a connection.
We have intake valves, and we draw in seawater with a syringe. We create a vacuum and basically pull the seawater through a filter that collects a particular size of particles.
Using onboard robotics, ESP can do tests ranging from detecting microbes and toxins to basic DNA analysis.
To develop systems that do that, they've looked to the oceans as a way, as a model, as a challenge. Do this in extreme environments. Do it in the deep ocean. Do it near an exploding volcano near the bottom of the sea. But show us how you can get a very complicated sample and dissect it into its parts and relay that information hands off without ever interacting with it physically.
The ESP has enough battery power to last roughly 30 to 45 days. The goal is to have something that can go out for 6 months. The importance of this technology to the average person is anybody that eats seafood should have some inkling of interest in this, because the toxins, the bugs that are out in the ocean can affect us.
Researchers say an ESP network might one day crisscross our oceans, monitoring for problems like oil spills, or on farms to detect microorganisms like salmonella in the water used to hose down crops before they're shipped to market.
Wouldn't it be great if we could detect out in the field before it gets into the packaging plant and onto people's tables? We want to provide that early warning system so that you know as soon as possible if something is unsafe before it moves further in its production process.
I think it's real exciting stuff. All people who do aquaculture have to test water every day.
Chris Newman is testing ESP at his fish farm to see if it accurately detects bacteria in his tanks.
Water quality testing takes an immense amount of time. If you get it wrong, a whole bunch of fish can die on you. So if you have something like this that gives you a database and comes up on a computer screen where you can just look at what your water quality is without having to go out and do that, it's revolutionary, I think.
Now Scholen's team is working to pair ESP with an autonomous underwater vehicle so it can go mobile. You might call it Lab in a Can 2.0. For Science Nation, I'm Miles O'Brien.
The Monterey Bay Aquarium Research Institute operates 3 oceanographic research vessels and 2 remotely operated vehicles.
Local efforts are underway in Wyoming to add protections to an area called Rock Creek in the Bighorn Mountains. This would make it off limits to loggers and new construction projects.
But not everyone wants that to happen. Some say the state already has plenty of federally protected land. Gary Stryker has the story.
Every fall, Bob Granstrom guides elk hunters in Wyoming's Bighorn Mountains.
Well, we just seen some cows up there that bull's been bugling since we left camp.
Lately, he's been packing people into Rock Creek, not for hunting, but to show them why he thinks this 34,000-acre area should be designated wilderness, added to the adjacent Cloud Peak Wilderness. Granstrom started coming here as a teen with his father. On or off trail, he knows where to find clean spring water and where to get the best views. Rock Creek's many towers and spires attracted wilderness advocate Justin Gerard to the area when he was working as a fishing guide at a nearby guest ranch.
The pinnacles always were like a draw to me. They always kind of beckoned me to come up here and explore them. And so every time I come up here, I see something new, see something that I haven't seen before, and it just makes me want to keep coming back.
Like Gerard, Brad Lee is working in his hometown of Gillette to raise support for designating Rock Creek as wilderness.
Howdy, Justin.
Hi.
I'm Brad from the Wyoming Wilderness Association.
How you doing? Nice to meet you.
He signed a business endorsement for us several weeks ago, and just want to come in and say thanks and maybe give you a brief little update.
So far, Lee has signed up more than 70 businesses in support of the designation. But he faces an uphill climb. Some want to keep the area open for possible future logging, roads, or other development. Some say Wyoming already has more than enough federally managed wilderness.
I think the land that the federal government
isn't being used wisely by the federal government. I think it would be better off if the state had control of it, that being that the people of Wyoming could control our own destinies instead of having somebody from another area trying to tell Wyoming what to do with their land.
First proposed as wilderness in the 1984 Wyoming Wilderness Bill, Rock Creek was pulled out at the last minute to investigate potential for oil and gas and water storage.
And after they've done a lot of research and years of studying the area, they've found little or no potential, and it's just a rough, rugged area that isn't worth developing.
For Grandstrom, a formal wilderness designation would be the best way to preserve for his grandchildren the scenery, solitude, and backcountry experience he shared with his father.
You know, I just think it's worth protecting for generations to come.
For This American Land, I'm Gary Stryker.
In 1872, Congress named Yellowstone National Park in northwestern Wyoming as the first national park in the world.
A lot of people across the United States are paying closer attention to the food they eat. Farmers markets are thriving, and so is the sale of organically grown produce. But what if farmers could somehow beat Mother Nature and plant those sought-after crops in the frigid winter months?
Yeah, right there. See? Literally, I seeded that out 2 days ago. Fast.
Making the growing season grow longer. That's the idea, anyway, for Daphne Yanakakis, an organic farmer in western Colorado.
Carrots 3.
Along with husband Don LaRoe, they're growing vegetables in wintertime as part of a study by Colorado State University. The vegetables grow under the protection of unheated greenhouses called high tunnels, which hold in heat stored by the earth at night and capture solar heat during the day. They also provide protection from the wind. These farmers plant a variety of cold, hardy vegetables at monthly intervals and record weather data collected electronically into custom software.
And then here are the 2 events where we got down to -10.
The data is collected from 5 farms across Colorado and will be compiled and made available to other small-scale farmers. Funded by the U.S. Department of Agriculture, the program is called, and here's a mouthful, the Sustainable Agriculture Research and Education Program, or SARE. The study is intended to help small-scale farmers in the Rocky Mountains remain productive and profitable through much of the winter by utilizing high tunnels. Even when outside temperatures reach sub-zero extremes, these simple structures allow vegetables to survive harsh winter conditions and enable farmers to grow more.
And high tunnels are cold frames. They're very low-tech greenhouses without any supplemental heating or cooling in them. And they allow growers to extend their growing season at least a month on each end of the frost-free period.
For the winter growing, it allows you to sort of have a continuous flow of income, which is, not a typical thing on a farm, at least not in the, northern climates.
It really helps and gets us to market with the greatest diversity and sets us apart from other growers.
We have a lot of hail where we are.
Frank Stonecker of Colorado State is in charge of the winter growing study. By enabling profitable, small-scale organic agriculture, he's hoping to help reverse an alarming trend in American farming.
We have less than 1% of our population now that's directly involved in food production. That's really, really susceptible to collapse.
Stonecker believes there is a crucial need for more young farmers in agriculture, especially those producing food locally on a smaller scale.
A big part of sustainability is community sustainability and food security in the community. And the more local food that's produced and the more people that are consuming locally produced foods, the better.
Organic agriculture represents a fast-growing portion of the fruit and vegetable market. small-scale growers cite the need for additional research dollars to fund more studies such as this.
So you'd think you'd be funding the things that seem to be growing, the things that offer some promise, but that money is not being given to those sorts of projects. It's being given to big agribusiness corporations and biotechnology and that sort of thing.
With limited resources, these farmers continue to learn and pass on their knowledge as fast as nature will allow.
There are some revolutionary things going on in agriculture.
And we'll have more on crop innovation coming up soon on This American Land.
This is a very elegant micromanager of nutrients, water, and a terrific harvester of sunlight. Very fine, textured, and deep. This is about 10 feet long or more.
We'll take you to Kansas for an amazing idea in farming.
Thanks for joining us. On every show, we're going to bring you thoughtful and unique stories about America's natural resources, landscapes, water, and wildlife. We'll see you next time.
Funding for This American Land is provided by the Weiss Foundation, the Turner Foundation, the Daniel K. Thorne Foundation, the Pew Charitable Trusts,